Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Will and Amy Johnson, and they are with an organization known as SPO. We have had other guests before from SPO. Specifically, we had Sophia Fernandez, and she works with Support Raising Solutions as far as being her organization's facilitator, and I know she does some training and coaching within SPO. And Sophia and I have a great relationship, and at one point, not too long ago, I said, "Hey, Sophia, who would have a really interesting support raising story that the listeners to the SRS podcast might like to hear?" And she specifically mentioned you, Will, and you, Amy, and said, "Don't just get one of them, get both of them." So, Will and Amy, welcome to the podcast, first of all.
Good. It's great to be here, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
And how long have you guys known Sophia, and how long have you been with SPO?
Yeah, I've been with St. Paul's Outreach SPO for about going on my 5th year now, and known Sophia through all of it. She was there. I think she was there the year before me, so she's the vet, but known her about 5 years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, similar to me. I came on staff with Sophia, actually. We were both first years together, which such a blast, so many memories. And then I've served with SPO for 5 years, and I currently transitioned from staff actually back in May, and now I'm in a counseling program for a licensed clinical mental health counselor.
Okay, cool. Well, Sophia had said that you guys have had a really interesting journey, and in particular to how that has related to support raising and all that. But of course, we're going to get into that. But first of all, I understand that you are newlyweds, right?
Yeah.
Going on month number 4.
Yeah.
Number 4. All right. Yeah, that's great. Now,
So almost
I understand it. It sounds like you are the one in particular that had a bit of a roller coaster journey in the whole support raising thing. And Sophia, when we were talking, she had said, "Hey, you got to ask him about this because he's had a massive change in how he's approached stuff." So I just want to start with you, if that's okay, and tell us a little bit about your journey from being not funded or underfunded or whatever wherever you were to being in a place of health so that you can focus on your ministry role.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, Aaron, good question. I guess it happened about 3 years ago. I was kind of in a place with SPO where I wasn't quite sure if it was a long-term calling or not, and I got an opportunity to switch campuses and move down to Florida State in Tallahassee. And really at that point, I was okay just kind of really accepting poverty and taking a specific call from the Lord there to almost live under the normal means, in kind of a radical yes to what he had for me. But the year went on, and the Lord has his ways. And even if I thought that's where my life was going, he actually said, what if you step into marriage? Actually, what if you start stepping into making this a more longer term walk in your life? And yeah. And then all of a sudden I was faced with, okay, single bachelor guy living pretty detached, making, enough to keep the lights on and being okay with that,
Right.
to, oh, there might be a family in the future. There might be people. How do we actually start fundraising to even be in a place to date someone and welcome them into that? And then after a year of getting to, enough to live off and save, after a year, I actually was dating Amy and was saying, whoa, we could get married here. Okay, now we even have to raise more.
So it sounds like you were okay in living on less, maybe less than less, maybe less than what you really probably needed, so long as it was just you. But you began to have a realization of some responsibility if you actually married somebody and maybe even had kids, or is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it was something definitely along those lines, but then it was also God was doing a work in, you're not just being on mission here, serving in this ministry for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but what if I'm actually calling you to do this for the rest of your life or for a very long time? How do you see
Mm-hmm.
that? I think I was viewing this work as a very temporary call, and the Lord was just inviting
Yeah.
me. You can't really discern it as a long-term thing
Yeah.
if it's not
Wow.
healthy.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you began to really, sounds like you're listening to the Lord. Your focus was more on ministry than on the math and numbers, but it sounded like your life, just the circumstances, as well as just the work that the Lord was doing in your heart, you began to realize, wow, this what I'm doing right now might not be sustainable long term. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds as if you began to realize, wow, I might have to do this differently.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a very good point there. Yeah, that was exactly what was happening.
Hmm.
So when you and Amy started dating, were you already, I guess, were you far down that road, or did that help kind of move you down that road to more of an understanding of need for the long term?
Yeah, I think we started dating, and I was just getting kind of down that road. So I was in my heart of, okay, I'm fundraising a pretty low amount here, enough to get by. Uh, I need to start actually making a jump to get in a place where I could invite someone in there. So I wasn't quite fundraising of bring on the kids and the mortgage and, you know, college tuition quite yet, but
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah,
steadily, yeah, not yet.
Oh.
But I was steadily increasing at that point. But God was, he was low, he was slowly working a change in my heart. I think it would have been too much to say, hey, go from X amount of dollars to 4X amount of dollars or something like that in
Hmm.
one summer. But he was, hey, here's the step you're on. Let's take another
right.
step. Let's keep taking another step, and let's
Mm-hmm.
actually actively start working up there.
Hmm.
In the boot camps we talk about adding over time that most people that are in some sort of missions type work over time, that they have a realization that, well, first of all, they're not in it for the money, because if that's the case, yeah, wrong, wrong idea, wrong field. Go ahead and switch out now. But um, they have a realization over time that their budget needs to grow in breadth and
Mm-hmm.
depth when it comes to partnership with people on their team. Like they need to go closer with those that are really praying for them and financially supporting, but also, and it is separate, but also that they might need to add to people on their team. So what practically, and Amy, I promise I'm going to get to you next. I want to hear some stuff from you too, but
Oh, this is great.
practically, what did that look like for you? Being in Florida and realizing that, okay, I'm going to need to raise a little bit more to get above the poverty line. You didn't say that word, I said that word, but to get above the poverty line,
Yeah.
what did that look like?
Yeah. So it started about May, the summer. It started at the end of the year in May, going into summer,
Okay.
which was when we did the kind of bulk of our fundraising. Um,
Okay.
and really, it was a lot of prayer. It was a lot of turning to the Lord and saying, okay,
Mm,
if you're calling me to now step in this direction, make it a little bit more longer term. God, I'm going to need you for this. I'm going to need a lot of your help here. Um,
mm.
and I believe that you got a
That's
call out
great.
here. As we start, the theme of our journey could be talking walk by faith and not by sight. And we can get to that, but that was even before it became an instrumental verse for both Amy and mine's marriage. That started to work its way into my heart of, by faith, this is possible. By sight, not really looking there.
Right.
But then practically, I actually went back to the very first name storming list I made 2 years prior when I was first coming on staff. And now all those people who I was really scared to call, because I kind of called the easy people who knew and were more support, but those people who are a little bit further out from the circles or not quite sure exactly where they stood. Well, now I was praying for courage to call them up and to be asking and to really be sharing actually the mission and this new conviction growing in my heart. And it was amazing. I think definitely the Lord's timing, but a lot of people who earlier I would have called and not had the words or the experience to back up what was in my heart was now, they were now in a place where we could actually have a conversation, and it was more about the mission. It was more about the experience and sharing, this is what's happening. This is the need. This is where we're at. And, God was faithful in setting up the appointments, and I was able to raise enough.
I mean, you're faithful in making phone calls and reaching out, but I love that because it sounds like there's some people that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you didn't want to call, but you did out of obedience, and it sounds like you began to realize this isn't just about money. This is inviting people into doing the life-changing work that SPO does on the campus, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was so much more than a scary phone call. It was now, hey, there's something burning in my heart, and I want to share it with you.
Awesome. All right, Amy. So I want to shift gears and let's hear a bit more from you now, if that's okay. So you used to work for SPO, but not anymore, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So when you were, so you raised some support and lived off some support. So I don't know what your occurrence was, but share with us a little bit. So pre-marriage, back when you worked with SPO, how was your funding? Was that something that you worked real hard and you got full funding, or was it something that you're like, well, I don't know? Like, tell us a little bit about your experience prior to you and Will hanging out so much.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I would say when I first jumped onto staff and heard the call for mission, I came kicking and screaming in regards to support raising. As many young missionaries, that was the number one obstacle for me. I came from a hardworking family who you earn your keep, and it was very foreign for me to ask and invite people to support the mission through a financial and spiritual means. But really what the game changer for me was, SPO had actually just started their partnership with our SRS, and we went through the whole entire boot camp, and really the scriptural studies and testimonies was where I started to experience a softening of my heart and a conversion in my own heart in how I view finances. And it was really there that I started to, I'm a visionary and I love the God Ask. And I started reading the God Ask and catching the vision for what God could actually have for my life, and becoming inspired and excited to want to actually build deep relationships with my team. I love people and love relationships, and started to realize, well, if this is all that is, I can do this. I love people and I love the Lord, and I need to do it with his power and his strength. But really, this is having God's heart for his people. And the mission doesn't start when I hit a campus. It actually starts when I encounter people that would desire to invest in this mission. And that's really what's going to propel me on campus. So that was a little bit of my kind of beginnings as a missionary. I served for about 5 years with SPO, and that was really the vision and the track that God had me on. Every year, he was so faithful. I could start crying. He was just so faithful to me, to the students, to the deep relationships that I was able to form. Even in my family, being able to share my faith was a great joy, to have an excuse to share, and journeyed with people for 5 years. So it was a surprise to me when, towards the end of my service, not knowing it was going to be the end of my service, that God was inviting me on a similar yet different call. I was encountering many students who had mental difficulties on campus and referring them to counselors. And recognizing that there wasn't enough supply for the demand, that there wasn't enough actually counselors on campus to walk with these students, and really felt like God was asking me to actually set aside a mission that I love and serve in a very similar way but different, and put 2 feet into counseling. So this is all happening, kind of this praying for next steps in counseling, actually, as Will and I are dating.
So I would just want to clarify here that you were being faithful to the Lord and serving with SPO,
Mhm,
and God has you raised support, and so you got to go through that really independently of Will, and yet as you guys move towards actually getting married, God actually calls you into counseling where you didn't really need a financial support team anymore. So
mhm,
uh, I just want to affirm that sometimes there are some missionaries that they feel this calling and they feel like it's forever, and it might very well be. And other times it's a season thing.
mhm,
We always want to hold stuff in open-handedness. So I'm always a lot more excited about hearing a missionary type like yourself that leaves staff fully funded, rather than those that they never got fully funded and they're suddenly hearing something different from the Lord because they can't
mhm,
lose their support. Right? That's a completely
mhm,
different conversation. I love how you even framed that you're sensing God calling you in to
mhm,
counseling. So I interrupted you a little bit there, but I want the listener to catch that that's a win. I mean, that's so cool. So please
mhm.
continue.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, so like you were saying, we were getting more serious in our relationship and really praying and asking God what He would have for us, what would be His plan for our life, and really sensing, wow, I think we are being invited to step into engagement. And for me, that was really eye opening. I think the man, Will, he actually took a lot of prayer and preparation, and kind of knew when he asked me. He had an inkling of, wow, this could really go somewhere. And when we started dating, I knew that it could, but I think I started to recognize, wow, this is actually a big call. There's like
Yes.
responsibility in stepping into marriage and family. And I started shaking a little bit. Wait a minute, God's faithful to me, but how is this going to be as a family? And how is this going to be as a couple? And kind of an invitation to really dive deeper in, do I trust in God? But do I trust in this man? And I remember there was
Mm.
one conversation in particular. We were at the good old DQ, Dairy Queen. I don't know why. That's where this
Yeah.
conversation.
We're all good conversations
Yeah,
about life
Hold on.
we love ice
The
cream.
for the sad people, Dairy Queen by them. It's a wonderful soft serve ice cream extraordinaire little shop where you can just go in and
Mhm,
get one, and they have all sorts of different stuff. I grew up like 4 blocks from a Dairy Queen, so I'm a fan of the Dairy Queen. So they're
mhm.
not everywhere in the world or even in the country, but good old DQ, good stuff. Okay,
It's
so you
good
got
stuff.
tell us your Dairy Queen story.
Yeah, so we just happened to be there. We like ice cream, and we had already mentioned engagement, the word, and we knew that was kind of where our relationship was really leading. But this was an intentional conversation that Will actually asked me to meet there, and he started to really pour out his heart and say, put his heart on the line and say to me, Aim, I'm ready to move forward in this. I'm actually ready to ask you to be my wife. And I want to know from you, is there any other hesitations on your side? What has the Lord been speaking? What are obstacles? I want to give you full freedom and space. And if there is anything, let's talk about it and let's work through it. And
That's
so,
defining the relationship. Bill. Good
yeah,
job, brother. Woohoo!
he did a great job.
Yeah, that ice cream courage in me, so it was helpful.
um,
I think fries and a banana split.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I was shaking. I kind of knew this conversation was going to happen. And I was working through prayer with the Lord and Him inviting me to trust Him, to trust this man. But really getting the sense that I had to actually say that to Will. I had to actually invite him and encourage him and share with him my heart of this was my hesitation. So I actually shared with Will, can't remember the words that I exactly said, but I laid my heart on the line and said, Will, I want to marry you, but will you be a man that is faithful to God in prayer? Will you be a man who actually fully funds our family? Will you be a man who actually follows through? Because actually, to fully fundraise for a family, have you thought about what that means for the vision for our life? Because we were praying through, can we be a family on mission for long term? So
Wow. Wow. Y'all had like a serious conversation at the Dairy Queen. That's fantastic.
All of our best conversations have come at Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
So Will, the princess is throwing down the gauntlet there. She is like, "Are you going to step up? I'm not an easy catch, man. What you going to do about this? How did you feel? How did you respond? How did you move forward?"
Yeah. No, when she said that, I knew that was coming, but it was still, whew, what a moment. I just felt that this was the future on the line, and there really wasn't any other answer than yes. And I'm glad that the woman I'm about to ask to be my wife, I'm glad that this is her top priority. And marriage is about getting each other to heaven. If this is how she's starting it, wow, there's no doubt that that's where she's pushing. But yeah, I think in the moment there's a little bit of nervousness and excitement.
Sure.
But it only took a second because I just looked back, and every other instance in my entire life, God was always faithful and always came through and always won the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this reassuring voice of, this isn't going to be the thing that breaks God. No, like this isn't going to be the thing that stops us.
Mm-hmm.
If he is always faithful, he will always be faithful. And he is always faithful. Sounds simple, but
sounds simple. Living it sometimes can be a little terrifying, right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an adventure.
All right, so you finished your hot fudge sundaes and your butterscotch caramel and all that kind of stuff, and you moved forward. You got engaged, like all this started moving forward, and then at the time we're recording this, because I realize some people might go back and listen to this later on. The COVID-19 vaccine has only been out in the United States for a month, maybe two, and so doing a little timeline in my head here, it sounds like you guys were at least engaged or getting engaged not too long before the world broke, so to speak, and that Will, you got to do a lot of additional raising of funds in COVID-19. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we got engaged on February 27th of 2020, and I think like within the month the world shut down. So it was surprisingly, well, it was surprising to be sure, but we got together and we started praying, how are we going to do this as we go forward? And I mentioned earlier, there was kind of the central theme, central verse that has been foundational to our marriage, but this is actually the time it came up in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. St. Paul, he's talking about walking by faith and not by sight. And in the grander context, it's talking about having this kingdom gaze, having this longing for heaven, being truly at home in things that we can't see here right in front of us, but truly being home with God. And this was a time that we could walk by faith instead of sight, because at sight, it did not look like this was the best time to go start a family, or this time to go asking people who are experiencing spiked unemployment and scarcity of, is the world going to end, and is there even going to be enough money to get us to 2021, and all sorts of fear and confusion and everything. This was what we were stepping into as we were about to make this foundational piece for our family. And the crazy thing, Aaron, is it was actually God's providence at work in a very small way. And I can say that kind of in this microcosm of everything. Obviously, there was a lot of hardship and a lot of difficulties that came from it. But the way that we saw it play out in our life was we needed a little bit of extra time to partake in a huge endeavor of, one of the first things we wanted to do was to meet with Amy's current support team as she was transitioning off of staff and see if they would like to continue supporting the mission by joining my support team.
Absolutely.
And it was amazing. Just want to honor my wife here for a second, but in the 5 years that she was on staff, not only did she build a support team and be fully funded, but she cultivated that team, and she actually grew really deep relationships with the men and women on that team. And there's people that were friends that turned into even deeper friends. There are people that were acquaintances that turned into really close confidants. And I don't know anyone in our organization who actually did it better than her. I might be a little biased, but I'll stand by that. I'll stand by that statement. But
well,
also,
that's a great kudos for you, Amy, because quite honestly, one of the things I feel like we battle sometimes with Support Raising Solutions is really helping missionary type leaders realize that you need to have a relationship with your supporters. Those that will allow it, there's some that won't, but that people aren't ATM machines. You don't just go to them when you need cash. You should be praying for them and building that relationship and inviting them in to pray for ministry stuff. So double kudos to you, Amy, for doing that. That's so cool that Will got to discover that in a really, really natural way as he was asking people to maybe kind of stay on your team, although switching teams onto his team.
Yeah.
Well, what we found too was it was a joy for him to meet with my team twofold, because I was so pumped to continue to have these people run with us in the race. What a joy it was. I was actually saddened when I knew that God was calling me to leave SPO. I wasn't engaged yet, and it's like, oh, but I love my support team. And a joy to keep running with them, but also a joy because Will and I actually met with them together, every single person on my team.
Awesome.
And in that, Will actually got to catch a glimpse of who I am, actually. I think he got to actually get to know me more. And I can tell you, Aaron, the best marriage prep that we probably experienced, being engaged for a month and then going out and support raising with one another in a pandemic, really bonds you.
Yeah. Stepping right into the fire, right?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people say, by the way, Amy, because you're a professional counselor now, moving that direction. I have had multiple people say, hey, going through the boot camp was some of the best marriage counseling we've ever had. Because it forced some of those conversations that didn't come up naturally but really needed to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so just to jump back in and kind of pull out what Amy was saying too there, in that providence though, when everything kind of shut down as we were stepping into fundraising, it gave us the space that we could meet with everyone who was on her team, because being in ministry for 5 years, you get a lot of people on your team that you're working with. Right. And not only could we meet with them, but being in Tallahassee, Florida, everyone was now coming onto Zoom at the same time. It was something that was becoming more and more familiar and necessary in the world. So all these people who we probably wouldn't have been able to meet with even a couple months earlier, because it would have been a phone call or email or something.
Because we're both from Minnesota. Just want to jump in.
Good call. Yep. But meeting with people all across the country, we got to meet with them. And then this was the coolest part, but even just the encouragement, how easy it is for the lie to sink in of, well, let's fix all the other problems before we go on mission. Let's kind of clean everything else up here. All the people we met with, there was such an overwhelming and resounding sense of, yes, this is what the world still needs here. If everyone's going
Hmm.
to isolate and distance, we actually need a gospel of love, relationship. There's fear, we need boldness. There's confusion, we need truth. And there's so many people that were
Mm-hmm.
just encouraging us and giving us heart to continue stepping
Mm-hmm.
into the mission
Yeah.
of, we left these meetings and we were more encouraged than the people we were meeting with as we're trying to talk with them, and they're like, no, this is necessary. So it was just this
Yeah.
threefold process of, there was time, there was a means, and there was an even deeper increasing need for fundraising. And I think that's
Yeah.
still carrying into
Mm-hmm.
today. Definitely, there's still more need than ever here.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And that does also illustrate kind of a completely different point, but it's worth noting that you pivoted when things needed to be pivoted. You didn't go, well, I guess it's better to meet with people face to face. So since we can't, we just won't. No, you said, you know what? Let's see who might be willing to use a video conference call. Let's see who we can connect with.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, while you were doing that, I did have a lot of feedback where there's a lot of missionary types that were wrestling with that very thing. And there
Mm.
were people saying, well, we just can't, people aren't going to give right now. We can't raise support right now because it's, we can't sit down with people. So we just can't do it. And I heard that, I'll call it an excuse. I don't mind. I'm going to call it what it was. It's an excuse. I heard that excuse many times. But then I also heard from a lot of people like yourselves that are like, no, this is a great time to try something different for the glory of God. Don't just give up. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
sounds like it went very well for you. And so now here you are. We're recording this in early 2021, and you're married. You're fully funded. What are a couple of big lessons? And if you both want to throw one out, that'd be great. But what are a couple of the bigger lessons that you've learned throughout this process and walking by faith, not by sight?
Hmm. I think one thing that comes to mind, I think when we were stepping into support raising, I had a mind of, okay, Will is support raising. We are inviting my team onto his team. And he is running, like he will be, running and support raising and providing for our family. But as we stepped into it, it was just so clear that this is not my team, this is not Will's team. It's actually our team, Johnson and Johnson Family Company. This is the Johnson team, and I think just experiencing we are better together with the Lord, and
Yeah.
that actually every supporter that we met with, it was actually both of us. We were a blessing to both of them, and vice versa. And just realizing, like, wow, this is actually a joy to share in these relationships. And this isn't actually a weight that Will has to carry alone. But as his wife, I get to actually stand by his side and support him and actually love him, and our team, and that we actually communicate regularly, both of us, with our team, and that the load is much lighter when we're loving together.
Mm, good word. Good word.
Mhm.
Will, I think you have last rights, brother, as far as opportunity here to kind of send us out. What's a final word of wisdom or something you've learned to share with our listeners as we wrap up the podcast today?
Definitely. I think the word I would leave with is, if the Lord is calling you into mission, he has a way. Regardless how it seems and regardless how it looks, the Lord
Mm.
is sovereign and he has a way. And it requires prayer, it requires faithfulness, and then it's going to require a little bit of work. But I think
Mm,
always remembering that it's the Lord's to unfold. So I think faithfulness
yeah.
to him, walking by faith and trusting in him is the way to go. 100%.
Yeah. Well, Will and Amy, it's been a pleasure to have you on the SRS podcast. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Yeah,
Thanks,
It's been an
Aaron.
honor, Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.